Hey, peeps. Welcome into the Sixth Floor podcast. And we're drafting the 80s still, as we always do. I'm Yap, Breeze in the upper left this time, Sags the lower left, and Johnson in the lower right. Welcome, fellas. Everybody good?
Yep.
COVID free. Okay, good. It's Breeze's topic this week. So, Breeze, you want to expound and give us the draft order and your topic, not necessarily in that order.
Yeah, well, obviously we've been doing a lot of musicians and drafting Van Halen. We drafted Eddie Money songs. We drafted LL Cool J songs. So I kind of wanted to get away a little bit from the music that we've been doing in the past few weeks. And then I was watching the Notre Dame Clemson game Saturday night, waiting for Saturday Night Live to start. And it got me thinking once Notre Dame beat Clemson, and they were talking about how the last time that Notre Dame had knocked off the number one team was Florida State, when Florida State was in Notre Dame Stadium when they were ranked number one. And so it kind of got me thinking about what are some other upsets that we had during the 80s that we kind of still talk about today, or that we kind of remember still today. So that was kind of my thinking on what was going on.
Can we go ahead and say the U.S. hockey win? That's off the table, isn't it? I mean, because that's kind of like the thriller when we did the videos. I mean,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's the ultimate upset.
yeah.
That was all three of my picks.
You could have had two from that, because remember, they still had to go on to beat Finland for the gold in that. So
Won the gold.
yeah, that was just a semifinal game, which was crazy. And then the Soviets got the silver, which is weird because they were playing in that other consolation game, but they ended up getting the silver. But anyway, that's off the board. So this ought to open it up for some interesting picks and discussion. What is the draft order today?
The draft order is Sags is the first pick, then Filial, and then Johnson, and then myself.
So we're not really a clockwise or counterclockwise. It's kind of a diagonal looking thing there. So, all right.
All
Sags.
in.
Yeah, that's right. You think this is easy? Okay.
That was pretty solid.
Thanks.
All right. So it was kind of underdogs, right, Breeze? That was the theory behind the pick?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I went a different direction on this pick because my pick, the winner, was supposed to win. I'll say that up front. But there were times during the game and games that it didn't look like they would win. So it was really kind of – they weren't underdogs per se, but they shouldn't have won, right? So my pick is actually a dual pick. It is the 1986 NLCS and 1986 World Series by the New York Mets. So the Mets were 108-54 that year. They were the best team in baseball. Everybody but Gary Carter was high on cocaine, and they were just running amok they were amazing that year. Literally the amazing Mets, couldn't be beat. And they were my favorite team. I was 14 and I didn't know they were doing cocaine all the time, but I mean, hey, whatever gets you by, I guess. But so I was looking it up in the NLCS. It went 6 games. 4 of the games were 1-run games. It was incredible. And I found that as we go back and watch these things, it's really hard to watch a game and get the feel. It'd be really hard to go back and watch when Cleveland beat Golden State and just watch game 7, right? And because you got to build. And a lot of these games in the series, they built. And so you get to game 5, that went 12 innings with the Mets winning 2-1. So that was a long game. 2-1 in 12 innings is crazy, obviously. And then the next game, they won 7-6 in 16 innings. And if I go to the line score here, the Mets scored 3 in the top of the 16th to take the lead, obviously. And then the Astros scored 2 to almost tie it again. But fortunately, the Mets pulled it out. And then I won't go into too much detail about the 86 World Series. I think everybody kind of knows about that. But again, the Mets were down literally to their last strike. And my favorite baseball player of all time, Gary Carter, singles to center, well, kind of left center, and keeps it alive. And from there on in that inning, they kind of go on and goes between Buckner's legs, of course, in Game 6. And then similar to the Russians, or Americans versus Russia, we had to still win Game 7, which we did. So, again, the Mets were down to literally their last strike a couple times and were able to come back, again, sort of an underdog story. But, again, they were at the beginning, they were favored to win. But so I'm going to take the 86 NLCS and World Series as my first pick.
That call by Vin Scully in that game with the ground ball behind the bag. And, I mean, that's still I love Vin Scully calling baseball, and that is one play that just stands out for all of eternity.
And I think as I look back, again, I was 14. That's like, to me, that's almost like when you're in the height of, well, it was back then anyway, like the height of like sports fandom. As you get older, life kind of, you got other things pulling at you, and we're still fans of teams or whatever, but, there's so much going on. At 14, you got nothing going on, right?
Yeah.
In that age bracket. And I was just a huge Mets fan. I remember staying up, to watch the games late, and just hanging on every pitch back then. And it's just stuck with me forever. And again, I was a Mets fan, so it kind of helps out. But man, that 16-inning Astros game was insanity. It was just crazy.
Case in point, back then, you guys may have been the same way. I could name the entire starting lineup for the Padres, the Cubs, the Reds, the Braves, right down the line. Now it's hard to pick out two guys on one team. That's how things get in the way.
But your son knows every baseball player in the league, right?
Golly, he was quoting basketball players to me tonight, driving home from basketball practice. I'm like, what? How do you know
Who?
that?
That guy here is dead.
Cross him off then.
Yeah, I really liked those Mets teams. I was a huge Darryl Strawberry fan. Just how it was for me, it was unusual to see somebody that was that tall that was playing baseball. He had those incredibly long. His legs were like 5 feet long, and the rest of his body, it looked like his legs were like 3/4 of his body. And the way he would stand in there, and how many home runs did he hit that year? Like almost 50 or something,
All
like
of
40, between 40, between 45 and 50 home runs or something.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I'll tell you what's
awesome.
On Major League Baseball Network over the pandemic, they were showing the 86 NLCS and World Series. And what you really notice, and I don't want to be that old guy or whatever, but today all athletes are like, I know they're not, but they're like 6'8", 280. And although Strawberry was tall, but if you Wally Backman is like 5'6", 140 pounds. Like they all look like regular men, but they all had this supernatural talent, obviously, to play in the big leagues. And now it's like, oh yeah, Mike Trout, again, he's like 6'4", 250. It's like, well, yeah, he should play baseball, right? But back then, again, they all looked quote unquote normal. So it's really a weird thing. So.
Yeah.
That's my pick.
Okay. This topic, I mean, you actually have to do some research, right? Because, I mean, there's some that come to mind, but others you dive into it. And I have some picks that I'm going to go way off the board here. I mean, all my picks are going to be way off the board. However, with my first pick, I too am going to stay in baseball. And you talk about an upset. You talk about a Cinderella story, a team they were picked to finish dead last. But here in 1989, they battled back. They forced a one-game playoff with the Yankees and the Cleveland Indians behind a great play call by Jake Taylor, who bunted down the third base line, scoring Willie Mays Hayes from second base. I mean, Clu Hayward there at first base turned to throw it home, and Willie Mays Hayes was already there. I mean, they beat the New York Yankees in that one-game playoff. Nobody expected that. They were supposed to be moving to Miami.
They were.
I mean, and then all of a sudden, the next thing you know, they're pulling off pieces of Rachel Phelps's attire, and Pedro Serrano can now hit a curveball. It's unbelievable. I mean, the Indians beating the Yankees in '89 in that one-game playoff. Forget it. I mean, that's my biggest upset.
I will say, when I saw that in the movie theaters, I am not kidding you. like the very first time I saw it, first showing, when he comes out of the bullpen and like the crowd goes nuts and like Wild Thing starts, I'm not kidding you, I got chills. It was like unbelievable. So great pick.
And they're down 2, and then Serrano hits one that goes like 700 feet. It was unbelievable. That thing left the stadium. Talk about a Cinderella story. I mean, come on.
I didn't see that coming. That's good, though. Yeah. All right. My first pick. Who doesn't love like a good video clip of like a coach just going crazy, running around after they win a game? We all love those, right?
Yep, absolutely.
First one I can remember, a guy named Jimmy V, just running around, just going nuts. You're like, what in the world just happened? What just happened was his team, North Carolina State, just beat Houston in the 1983 National Championship game. A Houston team with Hakeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler. Is there any argument 2 of the top 20 players of all time in the NBA? You know, I mean, 2 perennial all-stars, without a doubt. So on one college team, Wolfpack find a way to beat Houston, and they win the game on an oop. I mean, think about that. We watch the NBA now, and there's 3 or 4 oops, per quarter. Back then, 1983, I mean, oops weren't all that common in the game, and that was the winning play. It's one of the first like basketball games like I really remember watching and be like, oh, this is pretty darn cool. And we all know Jimmy V is one, a legendary person in the business. God rest his soul. And I know me and Breeze are both UNC fans, but you got to give it up for one special moment for North Carolina State. So that's
one shining moment, if you will.
Yeah. Would you really call it an oop, though? I mean, that was
it was
a shot that was short.
Yeah, I know, but if you go do research, everyone refers to it as an oop. So
they're wrong.
Have you guys seen the thing on ESPN where they kind of relive it with the NCAA player or the NC State players? They kind of get them all together and they kind of relive that whole tournament series. They showed it on ESPN. I don't know if it was a 30 for 30 or just a special.
I remember that.
It was really good. They had the whole team that was available, and they started. I don't know if they did the whole season or just the tournament, but it was like, how they barely got into the tournament, and they just kind of kept winning, and it was really good.
All right, Breeze, you're up for 2 picks.
All right, so I'm glad that kind of Pat went in the direction that he did by having SAG. Sorry, I keep doing that. With picking kind of the LCS and the World Series Mets team, and I'm glad that Jason, you picked the movie there. That was funny. So because that's what I wanted to do with this topic is just kind of have. Wait. I wanted this topic to be kind of wide open and not really stick to like a specific like underdog kind of thing. So I'm glad that we're kind of being a little loose with that. So having said that, with my first 2 picks, my 2 picks are going to be from the same game. And this was not a huge upset because the teams were fairly evenly matched. But what it was it created 2 of the most iconic moments in sports history. And they're both from the same game. And it was a minor upset. So with my first 2 picks, I'm going with 2 goals that were scored by an Argentine attacker by the name of Maradona. And in the 1986 World Cup quarterfinal against England, he scored the goal called the Hand of God goal that put Argentina up 1-0, which is my first pick, which forever Maradona swore that he headed that ball into the goal when video clearly showed that he used his hand to punch it in. And only later, only within the last 10 years, he finally admitted, yeah, I hit it with my hand. So that's my first pick. And the second pick from the same game, just 4 minutes after that first goal happened, he scores again on a goal that is called the goal of the century by FIFA, soccer's governing body. Maradona gets the ball on the Argentine half of the field, receives a pass from a teammate, does a spin move past 2 English defenders, and just takes off down the field and goes the entire length of the English defense, weaving in and out of 5 different England defenders, gets on goal. The goalie comes charging out. He slices the ball underneath the diving goalie and scores. And so that goal has been iconic. Everybody talks about that goal, about all the defenders that he eluded on the way there and dribbling over half the length of the field. And like I said, not too long ago, it was voted goal of the century by FIFA. So 2 just iconic moments from that one game, and it propelled Argentina into the semifinal, which they ultimately ended up winning the entire World Cup. So those are the first 2 picks.
Safe to say I did not have those on my list. But soccer makes
it's like his wheels are spinning. He's trying to think of something funny to say.
What is that?
That was Andres Cantor. It's go.
I saw that in the list, as I was researching, and I do remember that. Well, I don't remember watching it, but I remember seeing like replays and stuff over the years of the Hand of God goal, and so I'm aware of it. But you're more of the soccer aficionado.
Yeah, you should check out the goal where he dribbles half the field. That's, today he never would have been able to do that today. Somebody would have knocked him on his rear end. But you should check that video out.
That's a red card, isn't it?
Yeah. Tactical foul.
Okay. All right, Johnson. Back to you.
All right. Like what Sags was saying earlier about how, like, when you're 14, is, especially in the era when we were 14, we didn't have social media. We didn't have as much access to sports and what other people's opinion were of sports. I mean, we pretty much had our circle of friends, what we saw on the TV, maybe what we read in Sports Illustrated, or the newspaper. And looking back on it, part of the fun from that era was discovering a player and like latching onto them, even if they weren't necessarily like on your team. In fact, and this has nothing to do with my pick, but for example, like when I first went to Marshall, I kind of thought I was the only person that was even aware who Shawn Kemp was. And Sags was a huge fan. And that's kind of how we bonded. It was kind of like, hey, I like Shawn Kemp too. We should be buddies. I mean, that's basically
that was exactly the conversation.
What happened, But in 1987, early in the college basketball season, I don't know how I ended up watching a Southwest Missouri State basketball game. But they had a guy, Winston Garland. He had a cup of coffee in the NBA. I loved watching that guy play, and loved watching him so much. When it came tournament time, I'm like, Winston Garland, his team can beat anybody. They were the 13th seed in the tournament, and you were playing Clemson, which would have been at number 4. That was also the first time I really took a big gamble on a bracket pick, like taking like a huge upset like that. And it was all because of Winston Garland, and they ended up beating Clemson. The final was 65-60. So that's more of like a personal reason than like an all-time great, upset. But it just makes me think about like how cool it was, to just kind of discover a player and just kind of like follow him through the course of a season, or in the case of a college player, his 3-4 years in college. So that's my number 2 pick. Southwest Missouri State beating Clemson in the opening round of the 1987 NCAA tournament.
It's funny how you say you just latch onto somebody. That's how I became a Mets fan, because I was a Gary Carter fan.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I caught a little at Little League, and he was a good catcher in the 80s, obviously. And he was with the Expos at the time, and he got traded. And I did not like the Mets, and he got traded to the Mets, and I was like, well, I guess I'm a Mets fan now.
Mets fan. Yeah.
And then, like, whatever it was, 3 or 4 years later, they're, World Series champs and best team in baseball. So, it's funny how one guy leads you to, lead you onward.
I've heard a lot of people say that Gary Carter is the best catcher ever in baseball history.
That is 100% true.
That is not
That is
accurate.
100% true.
That is not accurate. I'm scrambling now. I'm really disappointed because my next pick was going to be Southwest Missouri State over Clemson. I mean, what are the odds?
What are the odds?
No, I mean, I'm going even further off the board than that with my next pick. I'm a fan of watching the little guy break a streak, right? What?
I was gonna pick this.
You have no idea what I'm even going to say, do you?
I guarantee I do. Do I have a pen?
You text me and see if this is it.
I can. I'm using my. Hold on.
What's the
Go
matter
ahead.
with
Go
you?
on.
All right. So anyway, I like seeing streaks that are broken. I mean, I think of the Baltimore Orioles, who lost the first 21 games one year. Right? Was it 18 or 21? It doesn't matter because it's a long streak. But I like seeing streaks come to an end. And there was one long streak that you thought would never, ever, ever come to an end, because this had gone on. No, that's not it. That is, you're not even close. You're not even in the ballpark. You're not in the same state. You're not in the arena. You're not on the same planet. All right. So it was. I remember this vividly. It's stuck in the back of my head, and it might be stuck in the back of your all's heads too. It happened on a Saturday night in March of 1987. And this team, it wasn't even close. They weren't even competitive a lot. But this one night, one shining moment, anything can happen on any given day. Randy and Bill Mulkey scored the upset pinfall over the Gladiators on Georgia Championship Wrestling, which broke a streak of 180 consecutive losses, and that propelled them into the Jim Crockett Senior Memorial Cup Tag Team Tournament. And then at that point, David Crockett said, Mulkey Mania is running wild. Randy and Bill, these guys, I mean, if there was a definition of a jobber, they would be it. Just two skinny guys with bleach blonde mullets that were just in the ring, just cannon fodder for somebody else, for the big star to get over real quick. And nobody expected these. And they built up the Gladiators as this great tag team from California, and they're coming in. And it actually turned out it was one of the guys was George South, who was also a jobber back in the day, but he was under the mask of one of those. So it was a weird, just a stupid ending where one of the Gladiators picked up one of the Mulkeys for a body slam, and he tripped over his tag team, fell down 1, 2, 3. That's it. The Mulkeys go nuts. The crowd in the TV studio went nuts. Mulkey Mania was launched. They came out with their own shirts, and they were big time stars. But from that point on, nothing.
That's great.
But Randy and Bill Mulkey, the Mulkey brothers, upsetting the Gladiators on Georgia Championship Wrestling on a Saturday night in March of 1987. That's my number 2 pick.
That's fantastic. I remember that so vivid. That's great. We may have been at the house together watching that.
We may have been, yeah.
That was unbelievable. Okay. Wow. I don't know if I can top that, to be honest with you. So I'm going to take it from, I think, and I know Johnson's going to agree with me on this. I don't know if it's on his list, but I know he's going to agree with me on this because we've talked about it a little bit. So we're going to go from the high of Mulkey Mania to something that it still makes me angry. I think, let me get the year right. 1987, I believe. Yes, April 6, 1987. probably the greatest robbery in boxing happened when Marvelous Marvin Hagler boxed Sugar Ray Leonard, and Hagler lost by decision. It is the crappiest decision. And Hagler wore him out.
Yeah.
And Leonard ran the entire fight. And I'm not a boxing guy. Like, I know a few here and there. Hagler was absolutely robbed. And he was the Tyson before Tyson. Like, Hagler was the man. You couldn't beat this dude. And Leonard ran the entire flipping fight, and he won by decision. And it still makes me angry to this day.
Yeah. So my favorite boxer of all time.
He was robbed, wasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Great
that's my
pick.
second pick. Leonard with the upset. Now I got a couple here. But I'm going to go with this one because we're having some fun with it. So actually, this happened 2 days from November 14th. This happened in 88, I think. I'll have to look it up in a second. But there's a little school in Indiana that they can't play with the big boys. But there was one guy that if they got him to play, they had a chance. Mr. Jimmy Chitwood. And on November 14th, Jimmy Chitwood hit the game-winning shot to win the state title for Hickory in the Indiana State Championship games. And this is back what, let me set the table here a little bit. This was just a big tournament. So the little school played the big school. Mm-hmm. They didn't have classifications like they do now, or all these little, you got to play your own size school. Ugh. No, they just threw them out there, and it was like, whoever plays this. And I think you'll find that the rim and the free throw line are the same height and the same distance at the state title game as they were at the gym back in Hickory.
For the little schools and big schools?
Correct.
The same? Oh.
So.
That's interesting.
And I think we all remember the picket fence.
Yeah. And Jimmy Chitwood, he only missed 2 shots that entire season. And one of them wasn't even in an actual game. It was in practice when coach showed up to talk to him. But love Jimmy Chitwood, but you know what? Still can't go left.
Well, they didn't have film on Jimmy back then.
I think in Indiana and Kentucky, they still do the tournaments that way.
Well, that would be awesome.
Right.
10 minutes remaining. So, it was a good pick.
I think it's back to you, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
1986.
Okay.
November 14th, 1986, Jimmy hit the shot.
All right, my last pick, again, off the board. I'm going to go over into football now. I hit wrestling, I hit baseball, 2 of the big sports. So I want to go to football now, and I'm going back to 1986. I'm going to say it was probably first week in November, 1986, if I'm not mistaken. It was almost like the David and Goliath story, really. I mean, you got this small school against the big boys that, everybody knows they're going to run the table. They're going to win this whole thing. But I'm going to go back to that day in 1986 when the number 7 ranked Ripley Vikings in Class AAA goes to Morgantown and plays at Mountaineer Field and beats the number 2 team in the state, Martinsburg, by a score of 9-8. Mark Johnson kicked 3 field goals in that game, and the Vikings advance and beat Martinsburg in front of at least 500 people there at Mountaineer Field, and knocked off the powerful Bulldogs, and they move on to the second round. Ripley Vikings.
Oh, I hate you so much.
Was that your pick next?
No, actually, before we started recording, you made the comment that you noticed my background was different. I was going to go in this whole spiel after we got done with our picks, and I was going to talk about why my background is different, because I am currently in a location that may be close to where another exciting upset was born. And I was going to go into the big story, and I was going to mention how the 7th seed Ripley Vikings upset the number 2 seed in the 86 playoffs, and you just stole all my thunder there.
Sorry, man. Sorry.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, that's my pick. So.
All right, for my last pick, if anything, I've proved during this podcast that I have a good memory for obscure college basketball games from the 80s. I'm going back to the 1987 tournament again. This time it's number 6 Providence topping number 1 Georgetown, 88-73. And this was my first exposure to someone that would end up playing a little role in at least 3 of our career as budding journalists, and a guy named Billy Donovan, who scored 26 points in that game. And just if you're a basketball fan, you just fell in love with the way that guy played. And then, fast forward to our Marshall days, and oh my gosh, he's the head coach at Marshall, and we all got to know him a little bit. But it's just like every time I tried not to be like Chris Farley when I was around him. It's like you remember when you're at Providence and you got to play Georgetown, So, but that game always stuck out to me because I'm like, man, this guy's fun to watch. So, that's it. Providence over Georgetown.
Imagine if he would have played on Southwest Missouri State.
With Winston Garland.
Yeah.
Greatest backcourt ever.
He's no Jimmy Chitwood.
Well,
who is? All right. Breeze, your last pick, and we are down to about 5 minutes left.
All right. Well, since you stole my thunder with the number 7 Ripley Vikings, I also want to kind of mention, I was going to also mention when I was talking about that, it was just the year before that, 1985, another 7th seed that has connections with people on this podcast. 7th seeded Point Pleasant Big Blacks with an 8-2 record was going up against a 2nd seeded George Washington, and just missed it. Beating them. They lost the game 21-20 to GW. So unlike the Vikings the year before, they did not knock off the 2 seed. Just missed it.
Yeah. That was before Casey Hill played, though.
Yes.
Well,
that team had a guy named Clifford Simpkins, and he was freaking awesome. He was an all-state track champion. He was a wide receiver on the Big Blacks. He was a man.
Was he any relation to Dickie Simpkins?
I don't know.
That sounds like a made-up name, though, right?
No, but that's an NBA. He was playing the NBA.
No. Clifford Simpkins.
Oh,
that sounds like a
Dickie Simpkins played.
Like I don't know, Homer Simpson's neighbor or something.
All right, what's our time?
We're down to about 4 minutes.
Okay. With my last pick, I'm going to go with something that when this happened, for me, this kind of feels like it could be the beginning of many bad omens to come kind of thing for this particular team.
Already said Point Pleasant.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of scary that in 1989, the underdog Southern Mississippi football team with an unknown quarterback by the name of Brett Favre took a chance and took a good payday and walked into Doak Campbell Stadium and shocked the Florida State Seminoles 30-26. And little did Florida State fans know that loss to the small school Southern Miss would start a series of heartbreaking losses that they would go on to suffer during much of the 90s. So I feel like, you know, that game might have been like that thing where like something bad is going to happen to them at least once a year going forward after that. So Brett Favre put some kind of voodoo hex on them or something, being from, you know, Mississippi, Louisiana area, and has cursed Florida State during the 90s. So with my last pick, Southern Miss over FSU in 1989.
Brett Favre and his voodoo.
Yeah.
Whatever happened to him?
He retired 17 times.
Yeah.
You know, I think with this upset thing, you could look to the NCAA tournament and just have a draft of upsets in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah,
I
I've
mean,
got
there-
like 6 more
Yeah.
NCAA tournament games.
Yeah.
I mean, one that wasn't a tournament game, but one I had on my list that was on the board, not off the board, was Chaminade over Virginia.
Yeah.
I mean, that was-
Villanova or
yeah, Villanova, Georgetown. Villanova
Yeah.
shot like 77% in that game and still won by 2. So that's good.
Another one I had on my list, I wanted to get your guys' feedback on if you would think that this was an upset. I feel like it would be. In 1984 Olympics, we didn't mention. We can mention that Mary Decker tripping over Zola Budd's foot in the Olympics. That was kind of an iconic moment. I guess Mary Decker was kind of favored maybe to win that race, or among the favorites to win that race, and she fell and lost. So I didn't. Did that qualify?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And with so many boycotts, that Olympics, I think it was did that end up being the only medal that the U.S. didn't win the gold in?
Yeah.
It seems that they won like 10,000 gold medals in '84.
Less than 1 minute.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Another one I
Good
had on my
topic, Brady.
list. Yeah, another one I had on my list was 1982 Tulane over LSU. What I liked about that was that I didn't know that Tulane and LSU played like an annual game, and their game was even got a name. I didn't know that. I didn't know if you guys do. But when Tulane plays LSU, it's the Battle for the Rag. I thought that was pretty funny.
That is pretty funny. I like that. All right. Good topic.
And
Good job.
then with the Knicks getting the number 1 draft pick that they used to draft Patrick Ewing, would that be an upset?
Well, it was a frozen envelope, so it's kind of sad.